So, the first thing that I want you to think about is going back to your youth. Now, when I say youth, I mean sort of in your 8 to 10-year-old range. Is that cool? So, I don't know about you, but I grew up outside of Toronto in a little town called Hamilton. Anyone from Hamilton? See, we got someone from the Hammer. Got a Ticat fan or a Toronto fan, right? It doesn't matter. The point being is that when I was like 8, 9, 10, we would go outside and play hide and seek, right? It was fun. And the rules were basically figured out with one another. And we just had fun. Now, often in times of the street parties, right, we talk about what did we want to be when we grew up. And so the astronaut came up, the nurse came up, right? Sometimes I wanted to be the train conductor, and other times I wanted to be the UPS driver. I thought, this is cool. I want to drive that thing around town. That's fantastic. But about that train conductor, Sam Poynton's a little 6-year-old in York, England, and he finds out that the National Railway Museum is looking for a new director. So he writes a letter to Mr. Tucker. He says, "Dear Mr. Tucker, here's my application for director. I'm writing to apply to be the new director of the National Railway Museum. I'm only 6, but I can do this job. I've got an electric train track. I'm good on my train track. And I can control 2 trains at once." Now, the best part of this story is the bottom right of the letter. It says, "PTO, please turn over." I mean, you can't teach that, can you? That's just innate. But that being said, you're Mr. Tucker. You're controlling the board of the National Railway Museum. You've got 2 decisions here. One, if you're English, you would throw the application into the bin and just squash this young man's life. Or you could have a think and wonder, what are we here for? And make him the director of fun. Which he said, "It's the best job in the world. I love it. It's good fun." You see, that's purpose. But if I go back to our childhood just for a second, I think we were lied to. You see, I remember Goodnight Moon. You know, I was cuddled in my bed and this book was read to me. I was like, oh my God, the sun is coming up tomorrow. And then recently, having goats, 3 of them, right, I would read, Guess How Much I Love You, like From Here to the Moon. Wonderful book, right? And then Dr. Seuss was released this book in sort of the late 90s, like, oh, the places you'll go, the creativity that you'll see. And then when I was growing up, I was also read Harold and the Purple Crayon. I was told to be creative, paint outside the lines, Dan. And then the granddaddy of them all, The Giving Tree. If you give, you shall receive. Shel Silverstein, best book I've ever read, both as a child and to my children. But you see, this whole notion of the happy face, when we get to work, turns into the upside-down frown face, and there's data to support it. Now, the Conference Board says that in 1987, 61% of us were pretty satisfied with our jobs. But today, it's 47%. Over at Gallup, you'll know these stories. You know these stats. I hope you do, in the back of your head, right? 67% of us here in North America are either disengaged at work or chronically disengaged at work, which basically means we're showing up with a match and we want to set the building on fire. Globally, it's worse. It's 87%. And here's the worst data point, I think, of all out of the Gallup studies. 52% of us are, and I quote, checked out at work. I call it the bathtub of apathy. Now, there is some data that suggests that maybe we need to start connecting the dots between engagement and purpose. Over at NYU and through my friends at Imperative, they looked at this. And so here's one of the data points, just for example. How many percent of people in the world do you think have a role at work that's primarily fulfilling themselves, right? A personal sense of fulfillment. You know, when I saw this, I was like, oh, I hope it's around 70 or 80, right? 28% of us actually feel fulfilled, a sense of purpose in our roles at work. What about the execs? Well, interestingly, at Deloitte, they've made a relationship causal between engagement and purpose. And they found out that organizations with a strong and defined sense of purpose have 73% engagement. So what happens when you're engaged? Productivity's up, absenteeism's down, innovation's up, profitability, et cetera, go through the roof, right? It's causal. But the problem is organizations without purpose have a 23% average engagement score. Yeesh. Well, here's the, quote, nail in the coffin from HBR. Look at the bottom there. Our business model and operations are well aligned with our purpose. Only 37% of us actually agree with that. That means 2/3 of us are walking around with either a myopic focus on profitability or power. That's why we're there, right? To uphold it. So I'm freaked out here, right? I mean, I'm in HR, you're in HR, right? I'm like, what is happening, right? Is there an antidote? I hope so. You see, I feel like we need to be a little more like the art on the left and the girl on the right. Go back to your days as a kid. You want to be able to break free, but also you want to be able to dance at work. You want to feel good. So here's what I've recognized in my research and my observations as a chief learning officer, as a chief envisioner. You know, I think we just want to live the good life. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? We want to feel good. We want to feel good whether we're at work. We want to feel good whether we're at a bar, at a shopping mall, at a birthday party, at a pool. We feel good. But you see, the organizations where we work are made up of us, the people who want to feel good. Okay? Now, if we've got organizations where we've got to work and we've got people who want to feel good, don't those two entities make up society? And so, doesn't society rely on the people who work in the organizations? So, if people in organizations have purpose, don't we all win? And when I say we, I mean win, win, win. I mean us as humans, the organizations as an entity, and society on the whole. So I've got this Venn diagram. Everyone loves Venn diagrams, right? Okay? First person to say I love Venn diagrams gets a book. Right there. See? I even put it on the front cover. Book for you. 2 more to give away. So I think that first of all, we got to look at ourselves in the mirror. Purpose starts with you, personal purpose. But then we work somewhere in an organization. And then we have a role in the organization. So when it all comes together, you are in a sweet spot, but so is the organization, and that whole thing called society wins. So let's deconstruct this for a second. In personal purpose, I implore you and the employees that you serve to help them develop it, that's their purpose, define it, and to decide how they're going to show up each and every day. It's a what, who, and how question. Now, I appreciate Simon Sinek and the whole start with why thing, but this goes back to what you want to be when you grow up, who you're going to be, and how you're going to do it. This is about you. Then you work for an organization, and I hope you're working for an organization that demonstrates good deeds. The words around this rim here spell deeds. Delight your customer. Engage with your employee. Be ethical in all you do. Deliver fair practices inside your organization and serve all stakeholders, not just shareholders or profit holders or power holders. And then when you're in a role, you're going to demonstrate one of 3 mindsets. You're going to have the job mindset, where it just feels like a paycheck. You're going to have a career mindset, where you're the bully climbing up the ladder. Or you're going to have the purpose mindset. When you have that, this whole thing connects. It connects for you, the employees you serve, the organization that's serving society. So how? Well, when I started out at a company in 2002 called Crystal Decisions, I was the worldwide training manager, craziest title ever. And I inherited Mary. Mary was an instructor, or was a trainer, and you could tell she hated her job, loathed it. So when I got there, about 3 months in, I said, hey, Mary, maybe we should get you into something else. And so we put her into an instructional design role. 6 months later, all the grammar cops came up to me, knocked on the door. I was like, Dan, she can't spell. Mary hated the role as well, and so we moved her into a project manager role. 6 months later, I knocked on Mary's door. I was like, Mary, are you having fun? She's like, no, I hate this. And so I said, well, how about this? How about I fire you? And like the smile that just went over her face was like amazing, right? I had unleashed her. I said, I'll give you a big Canadian package, 4 weeks per year. We're good up there. And it was great. And then I worked with her for 5 years, helping her, coaching her. She did a master's degree in education. She went to Africa and helped build schools with Oprah. Then she became a social worker, moved to Halifax from Vancouver, and has been a social worker ever since. And she said to me, Dan, I realized and then decided that what I get paid to do needs to fit with what I know and feel to be my personal purpose. You've got to help those people out there see the light of their own personal purpose. Now, Tim McDonald is a realtor in Chicago, right? He's like, I'm making buckets of money. This is fantastic. But then, after he started dabbling into what he calls community management, this on-the-side thing at night where he's helping community managers be community managers, guess who phones? It wasn't Oprah, but it's a pretty close second. Arianna Huffington. Tim, it's Arianna. Yeah, we've been watching you do your thing with community management. Would you like to move to New York and run HuffPost Live? It was like mic drop, right? So he picks up his family, moves to New York, and he's hanging out with Arianna and the team, and he's running HuffPost Live. Loving it. He's like, this is what I want to do, not real estate. Goes to Dallas. Keynotes at Dallas. He's the second keynote. The one that came on before him was a gentleman who's running BTC, Be the Change. They're trying to curb hungry kids and the travesty that is kids going to school hungry. It's like, I think that's what I need to do. So he goes up to the gentleman afterwards and says, can I join you? Because I think that's really my purpose. And they made him the purveyor of purpose. No kidding. Now he lives in Florida, and that's what he's doing, helping this nation and its kids not be hungry when they go to school. He had to figure himself out as well. I went to the Netherlands and went to Amsterdam. I visited this guy, Bas van Abel. Boss is looking at his Nokia phone one day, his mobile phone. He's like, I wonder how this is made. So he reverse engineers it, looks at it, and says, blood diamonds, basically. Right? All the materials are unethically sourced through Africa and parts of the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Kids, like just horrible stuff. And he's like, we could do better. So he gathers a whole bunch of people around, right, in Amsterdam, his friends, and he says, let's make Fairphone, the world's only ethically sourced, developed, and designed mobile phone. Half their customers come from Germany now. We can't get it here in America or North America yet. It's crazy. But when he said, Dan, look, this is what we're doing. The purpose of Fairphone goes beyond being a company. We're all looking at the world in a different way. That's purpose. So as HR executives, how do you do this? Well, on the personal side, I want you and your entire organization to write an individual declaration of purpose. As was mentioned, mine, we're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through. That's why I go around doing these things and giving away books. That's what I believe in. Oh, see, just put a hand up and she got a book. That was amazing. 2, 1 to go. Not 3. Journey wrote a song, Don't Stop Believing, right? So don't stop believing in yourself, but also don't stop developing. Don't just send people to your LMS. God, what is that thing, right? It's archaic, antiquated, and militaristic. Help your people with proper development plans of purpose, like a Mary, so she doesn't feel as though that she has to be fired in order to unearth her own purpose. And lastly, I think you really have to ask yourself that, mirror question. Should you leave because it's not a fit? Or maybe there's some people in your organization, like a Mary, that have to be on their way. Now, maybe it's the same organization in a different role, in a different department or business unit, but you've got to ask these almost existential-like questions of your own personal purpose. And as leaders of people, help those answer them for them, because they're not thinking about it at times. Now, you also have another responsibility, I argue. Because you don't only have a seat at the table, HR, You need to be the table. You're the connected dot of all different business units. It's your job to help the organization see that it can demonstrate good deeds. So, does your organization have its own declaration of purpose? Not a mission statement, not a vision, but why it's here to serve society. Do you have an open, transparent culture? One that's engaged? I'll bring up two words for you just for a second. No disrespect to people who may work there. Volkswagen, Wells Fargo. How do you think the people feel at those two organizations today? And then lastly, how do you realign the organization so that the CFO, the board, the CEO aren't just in it for profit, shareholder return, dividends, or in some cases, obviously, just power, if you're not a for-profit organization. And then you got to start asking yourself, okay, well, what about the people in their roles? Well, I think the first step is for employees to see that they may be in one of these three different mindsets. And if they're particularly in job or career, something needs to be done about it. So on the job mindset, ask those questions. Does it feel transactional? Is it hedonic? Is it just a paycheck? Can we help you? And if they're in the career mindset, both remind them to send the elevator back down, but that the organization ought to be playing for the crest on the front, not the name on the back of the jersey. That's it. Now, it sounds simple, but it really does come down to who are you, what are you, and how are you going to show up? What's the organization made of? And what are those roles made of inside the organization? When it connects, you've got some good sweet spots happening. Like this gentleman, Dan Price, runs a little company, fintech, up near Seattle. Looks around and he says, I'm making like $1.5 million a year, and half my organization makes average $35K a year. What do you do? He said, anybody not making $75K now makes $75K. And he said to me, Dan, as a leader, there's a moral imperative to do the best you can for those you're leading. He dropped his salary down from 1.5 to whatever it is today to help pay for those salary increases of the people making $35K. Or Bridget and Joe. Bridget and Joe are working in the sort of marketing PR industry in LA for the music profession. You know, they say, this is kind of not great. We're just making other people's lives happy, not our own. And one day, Bridget, she goes on YouTube and she sees this video of this little girl, deaf, put special headphones on, and could hear for the first time, just this magic moment. She's like, that's amazing. She phones her buddy up, Joe, working in another company. Joe, we got to do something. They started Listen, LSTN. It's a headphone company, these beautiful wooden headphones. But what do they do after every sale, which is their purpose? They commit to helping a child on the earth hear again or for the first time. That's purpose. Purpose is Diapers in the story of Kim and Jason. Kim's from Toronto, emigrates to Sydney, Australia, meets Jason. For 10 years, they can't figure out what it is that they want to do with their lives. They've cleaned toilets, they've run an ESL program, they wrote a dating book. It all failed miserably. Until they decided to get married and have kids. And both their parents said they were nuts. So 3 months into the first child, Kim and Jason look at each other and they say, oh my gosh, what are we doing? I mean, these diapers are going to landfills and they're not biodegradable. Da-ding! They start Diapers, the world's only biodegradable diaper organization, and they've been going strong for 10 years because they wanted to do something more for the society in which they take part in. Or where I work, this little company called TELUS, $12.5 billion in revenue, 60,000 employees around the world. We had not so great engagement, and we weren't really doing anything in our communities. When we started to look at our engagement, when we started to look at our culture, when we said, hey, how are we going to serve our communities? Oh, we give where we live. 13 community boards across Canada established, and we saw our engagement go up and pretty much every other business metric correspondingly. Or Unilever. Unilever, 100-year-old organization like TELUS, back in 2009, bad engagement, Greenpeace all over them. The board decides to hire Paul Pullman. He comes in, goes to the street and says, no more guidance. We're not going to give you anything about our financials going forward. He institutes a new purpose. He calls it the Sustainable Living Plan. It becomes their culture. And then all of a sudden, good things start happening. Their profit goes up, their market cap goes up, their engagement goes up. And Paul says, Dan, our job as leaders is to drag the world back to sanity. We don't answer to shareholders, but to consumers. Or Mark Benioff. He starts this little company called Salesforce back in 1999. He says, from that moment forward, we will give 1% of our profit, 1% of our service, 1% of our time to the communities in which we serve. And he said to me, companies can do more than just make money, they can serve others. The business of business is improving the state of the world. You see, purpose fuels people. Like our man, Sam. But people also fuel organizations. Like in the case of Johnsonville, who doesn't love sausages? They had a big fire at one of their plants. 100 people put out of work. But the company leader said, don't worry, we're going to keep you whole for as long as it takes to rebuild this plant. We will pay for your salary. All we want you to do is volunteer 20 hours of time during the week to the community, and we want you to learn 20 hours a week. 11 months later, they rebuilt that factory. Because organizations and people fuel society. It works, I assure you. I've seen it firsthand and through interviews and organizational observation. So you got to climb the mountain. It's achievable. But like Ziegler once said, when you get there, there isn't any there. But you know what? If it doesn't work, in summary, just try whiskey toothpaste. Now in Scotch and bourbon flavors. And that might kickstart your day to purpose. Thank you so much.